think the whole secondary knows it. You know, there's a reason why they're in this game. I'd say it's certainly the best team we've faced all season, and if we don't play our best, then we're not going to advance.
And if that's not enough, Vikings safety Harrison Smith joined our own Mike Florio on NBC Sports Radio to talk about getting ready for the Eagles after the Minnesota Miracle.
My approach is that you always live in the moment, you know, enjoy what happens, and then put it behind us, move forward, because it's going to be all for nothing if we don't keep going and get better from what we did this past week and move forward. So that's our plan.
NBA tonight, the Celtics will go for 8 wins in a row as they host the Pelicans. College hoops, Trae Young and number 4 Oklahoma are at Kansas State. And on the ice, the Rangers will host the Flyers on NBCSN. I'm Jeff Biggs, NBC Sports Radio.
I hate it when my computer freezes up. Are we going to have our music or not? No. There it is, finally. Okay. Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Bilson. You're listening to 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. I am your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans, and we own the Tri-Cities. Right now, I'm going to wish that I own the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't mean to make this into the Steelers show. I know that I'm not in Western Pennsylvania, don't get me wrong. On the other hand, I know that the Steelers have a national following. I know that they have a defensive back from Kingsport. They have a backup quarterback and a defensive back from Tennessee. I think there's a guy from Mars Hill in the practice squad. I also know that they are, according to Facebook, the most popular team in Washington County, Virginia, and why not? In the old days with Bradshaw and Swan and all that, I can remember this, as a matter of fact, because they used to play in the South. Certainly the Steelers were the primary game, and certainly on WCYB they were the primary game a lot. But if you heard me yesterday, I was really ranting and raving, and in fact, when I looked back, I said, you know what? I know I talked about all the playoff games, and certainly we were the first station to really start covering Mike Malarkey. We had Joe Rexrod on to begin the show, and, you know, what was going on there. But my take was, boy, the wrong Mike was fired. And I know the Pittsburgh Steelers don't fire head coaches. You know, Noel and Cowher were both allowed to retire. Noel was there for 23 years. And for 15 years, Bill Cowher was there, and he was allowed to retire. He actually wanted to take care of his ailing wife, who was dying, actually. But you know what? It's time now for Mike Tomlin. Really? He went 13-3. The Steelers were never 13-3 before under Tomlin. You want him to be 14-2? Well, actually, under the circumstances, I do, because he let his personal politics interfere with his game preparation against Chicago, and that's why they lost that game. And then that's why the Steelers were not the number 1 seed. And then that's why they played the Jaguars and not the Titans this past week, and that's why they lost. And we'll find out this weekend if the Jaguars could beat the Patriots. And I don't put that past them, but the team is so undisciplined. The players, you know, you got to give me money. I'm going to retire. You franchise me again. I've covered the Steelers. By the way, I know they used to have a running back by the name of Rashard Huntley, who was very good. He had a yards per carry average of 5. And he scored the last touchdown at Three Rivers Stadium, as a matter of fact. He was Jerome Bettis' backup. And I remember going into the locker room one day. I was going to interview T. Martin, who was a backup for the Steelers at the time. And their locker rooms were close by. And I said, hey, Rashard, congratulations on scoring the last touchdown at the History of Three Rivers Stadium. And his actual quote to me at that time, this was his actual response: F, man, I don't care about that. Just pay me the money. Doesn't that sound like Le'Veon Bell? I'll retire if you franchise me 2 days before you play your playoff game. Doesn't that sound very similar? Well, Huntley was cut right after that. By the way, Huntley then, well, less said about that, the better. But you come up with a circumstance then where this is the locker room of the Steelers contemporarily. When you have Bell, when you have, all these all this chirping coming out. And there is a tremendous amount of distraction. It isn't a focused team. They do play to the level of their opponent. And that's the sign of a poorly coached team. Talking about getting rid of Todd Haley, he's the offensive coordinator. Todd Haley, his offense put 42 points on the board. Well, they didn't sneak it on 4th and 1. You know what? Don't give me that. Because on the pass play, Roethlisberger didn't see the open man. There's a guy, and I didn't see because it wasn't identified in the during the broadcast, but if you see the overhead shot, decided to go to I think it was Eli Rogers who was being covered and go for the big play. There was the $1.98 was right there for the first down on a curl route out to the left. He had an open receiver, just didn't see him. Call was fine. And for that matter, what does a sneak get you? It gets you some new downs, but doesn't give you any field position, any additional ones. A pass does. There's no momentum with a quarterback sneak. Generally, I just don't like the play call. I know that Roethlisberger is big and strong, and sometimes you have to call for them and all that. Generally, not big on that. There was also a 4th down run that the Steelers ran early on in the ball game from the Jaguars 20, and they ran wide, and they were stopped for a loss, and it was a stupid play call. And you know what? Mike Tomlin has called for that before Haley was his offensive coordinator. I seem to remember, Tomlin getting rid of Dick LeBeau and Bruce Arians, and I haven't seen the Steelers back in the Super Bowl since then. So maybe it's not the coordinators. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk reported on Tuesday he's hearing some of the team's limited partners intend to lobby Art Rooney to fire Tomlin and hire a new coach. These members of ownership, who bought into the team about a decade ago, don't have the authority to hire or fire anyone or make any sort of management decisions. They're minority owners. They are minority owners without a controlling interest. Rob Citron, Paul Evanston, Larry Paul, Stephen Paul, Bruce Ratner, Paul Sams, Benjamin Statler, Scott Swank, David Tepper, Thomas Tull, who's a billionaire, Peter Verichetti, Mike Wilkins, and oh, by the way, one more name you might know, John Stallworth, Hall of Fame wide receiver. The group is particularly incensed about the final 47 seconds of the Steelers' loss after the Jaguars kicked a field goal to go up 10 points. Steelers had the ball in the red zone, but moved in slow fashion, melted a ton of clock. Didn't this happen against New England, too? Without any clear urgency, ended up throwing a meaningless touchdown pass, mere seconds remaining on the clock. The players were moving without any sense of urgency. Yeah. This is so, there wasn't any urgency in beating Cleveland by more than a touchdown either. Beaten by 3 points and 4. They almost lost it. Those are the closest games. I guess they went to overtime against the Packers without Aaron Rodgers, but those were the closest games the Browns played this year against the Steelers, 13-3, division champs. Come on. Looked like the Steelers either didn't know what to do or they didn't care. They were assuming the game was over. Titans just fired their coach, hoping to land Josh McDaniels. Florio says it won't happen. He's locked into the Colts. If that is true, then John Robinson is a stooge. And frankly, I was hearing competition talk about, well, the Titans' job is just wonderful. And who wouldn't want to move to Nashville? Well, maybe I'm into hip-hop. The circumstance goes that, everybody says that. Who wouldn't want to come to Miami? Who wouldn't want to come to Phoenix? Who wouldn't want to come to Seattle? Who wouldn't want to come to Green Bay? Americana, come on. Who cares about the cold weather? It's easier to breathe. Everybody says that about their own city. Who wouldn't want to come to Chicago? Crime rate, maybe. I don't know. But No, seriously. I mean, they say that about, and that's what you get. This is one of the reasons why I like to have on writers and not play-by-play men, although we will have some play-by-play men. Play-by-play men I respect, especially ones that tell it like it is. On this show, there's not a ban on play-by-play broadcasters or anything. I just tend to prefer writers because they're going to be more objective, like Joe Rexrod, than an announcer for the team. And yeah, I mean, Rexrod saying, yeah, that's interesting right there. Robinson thinking he had the beat on McDaniel firing a playoff coach. I'll tell you this much, Pittsburgh would be a high-profile job, could land a big fish. It's late in the game. Hey, guys, I said this about the Titans. You know who I'd bring in if I was the Tennessee Titans? And surprisingly, on a list of 10 candidates put out by the Tennessean, not by Rexrod, but by the Tennessean newspaper, he wasn't on it. Guy I would want to bring in if I was the Titans, James Franklin, Penn State coach. All he does is win. All he does is win in difficult situations. You know about Vanderbilt. I think he was an assistant at Maryland when they won. But more than that, you know, Penn State now is a top 10 program. That was a program that could have easily, after the Sandusky scandal, just fallen flat on their face and have never, they could have been as ruined by that as SMU was by their death penalty. It was a possibility. Didn't happen with James Franklin. And though they put winning records up with Bill O'Brien, you know, wasn't anything truly outstanding. I know that Franklin, you know, he won't be able to recruit. Is he really a good game coach? Well, Mike Tomlin isn't. We know that. But if I was the Titans, I'd hire Franklin, bring him back to Nashville. But if I was the Steelers, I'd do the same thing. I'd do the exact same thing. Back in the day, the Steelers wanted to hire Joe Paterno. Said they hired Chuck Noll. Worked out okay. But yeah, I mean, the same sort of relationship and all that. And I look for up-and-coming college coach that could make the leap. I mean, think about this. Who other than Franklin would you choose as being that up-and-comer? Don't give me Saban. Saban was 15 and 17. Saban isn't a spring chicken. Saban is 100 years old. I would say that if I'm looking for that young up-and-comer, that guy that can make the leap from college to pro, that Jimmy Johnson, that Tom Coughlin, that coach, I would look to James Franklin. Easy. Now, I'll come back and I will tell you the 10 candidates that are being talked about as the head coach possibility for the Titans. Could they be for the Steelers as well? I don't know. Of course, Tomlin isn't out yet, and the odds are that he won't be, but boy, I tell you, he should be. He absolutely should be. Tri-City Sports Now will return right after this.
Jet Broadcasting Incorporated with News Livewire 1039, NBC Sports Tri-Cities,